North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We bring you the news, honestly, truthfully. We report the news, we analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. In other words, we de-propagandize the news. Then I make commentary. Not the news, not propaganda. It's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours, and that's why we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. Thanks for being here with us today. And I truly do welcome you and thank you for joining us. Last night, the President of the United States addressed the nation. The Associated Press reports it like this. President Biden warned that democracy itself is in peril. He called on Americans to use their ballots in next week's midterm elections to stand up against lies, violence, and dangerous ultra-MAGA election disruptors who are trying to succeed where they failed in subverting the 2020 elections. This is no time to stand aside, he declared. Silence is complicity. After weeks of reassuring talk about America's economy and inflation, President Biden turned to a darker, more urgent message, declaring in the final days of the midterm election voting that the nation's system of governance is under threat from former President Donald Trump's election-denying lies and the violence President Biden said they inspire. The president singled out ultra-MAGA Republicans, a reference to Trump's Make America Great Again slogan, calling them a minority but a driving force of the Republican Party. Pointing in particular to last Friday's attack on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, President Biden said that Trump's false claims about a stolen election have fueled the dangerous rise of political violence and voter intimidation over the past 2 years. There's an alarming rise in the number of people in this country condoning political violence or simply remaining silent, said President Biden. In our bones, we know democracy is at risk, but we also know this. It's in our power to preserve our democracy. AP, the Associated Press, continues. The president's speech focused squarely on the right of voting and the counting of that vote, amounting to a plea for Americans to step back from inflamed rhetoric that has heightened fears of political violence and challenges to the integrity of elections. President Biden was straddling two roles, speaking as both a president defending the pillars of democracy and a Democrat trying to boost his party's prospects against Republicans. He called out the hundreds of candidates who have denied the 2020 election result and now refuse to commit to accepting the results of the upcoming midterms. The driving force is trying to succeed where they failed in 2020 to suppress the rights of voters and subvert the electoral system itself. CNN reports the same speech this way. President Joe Biden yesterday delivered a stark warning to Americans that the future of the nation's democracy could rest on next week's midterm elections, an urgent appeal coming 6 days before final ballots are cast in a contest the president framed in nearly existential terms. We can't take democracy for granted any longer, said the president from Union Station in Washington, just blocks from the U.S. Capitol. It was a sharp message to Americans considering sitting out next week's congressional elections that the very future of the country was at stake. President Biden suggested the preponderance of candidates for office at every level of government who have denied the results of the last presidential contest, and he says it was a red flashing warning signal for the country. As I stand here today, the president said, there are candidates running for every level of office in America, for governor, for Congress, for attorney general, for secretary of state, who will not commit to accepting the results of the elections they're in. That is the path to chaos in America. It's unprecedented, it's unlawful, and it's un-American. President Biden's speech placed blame for the dire national situation squarely at the feet of his predecessor, Donald Trump, accusing the former president of cultivating a lie that is metastasized into a web of conspiracies that has already resulted in targeted violence. This intimidation, this violence against Democrats, Republicans, and nonpartisan officials just doing their jobs is the consequence of lies told for power and profit, lies of conspiracy and malice, lies repeated over and over to generate a cycle of anger, hate, vitriol, and even violence. In this moment, we have to confront those lies with the truth. The very future of our nation depends on it. What are your thoughts about those speech lines given by the president last night? Telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. This is an unfortunate speech given at an unfortunate time with unfortunate results for the Democrat Party likely in the offing. I'm disturbed, excuse me. I am disturbed by mountain cedar that's causing me to sneeze every 2 minutes. I'm disturbed. I am disturbed by the fact that the President of the United States is very selectively trying to paint a reality that simply does not exist. The president didn't speak about inflation. He didn't speak about the things that his own administration has done to create division in this nation. He has returned to themes that alienate half of America. It is, as I said, a speech of division, accusation, and in many ways, unreality. The president needs to back off. And it's too late now for any of that to affect this election. I don't know what the president is going to do following Tuesday. I really don't have any idea. I don't know how this first half of his first term is going to be characterized. I am concerned about the fact that this president will be completely out of any form of leadership position on Wednesday of next week. Now, is that a problem for those people that believe the president has taken this country down the wrong track? By the way, that's a huge number of people, somewhere in the vicinity of 70%. Nearly 3/4 of Americans believe the country is on the wrong track. He could scarcely do worse. No matter what happens in the election, he could scarcely do worse. But let's take some of these things and roll them back from the news reporting. The first thing in the Associated Press is that democracy itself is in peril. I've made this abundantly clear in my commentary on this broadcast. It's not democracy that's in peril. It's democracy. The idea that Democrat policies that we are seeing and that we are living under that have caused huge economic and divisive problems in these United States. I believe that it points out to democracy. Democracy is definitely in peril. The Democrat Party has failed this nation. That's why I'm saying, okay, what are we going to say about the president's first half of his first term? Are we going to characterize it as a failure? What are your thoughts? 817-379-2172. On the eve of this election day being Tuesday of next week, are we in a position where we can say the first half of the first term of President Joe Biden has been a failure? 817-379-2172. You can join us on the chat room if you will. You can find that chat room on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, and also Rumble. If you're watching this on Rumble, this show was recorded earlier today, but you can certainly get in touch with me by sending me an email. The email address is thewellsreport@frontier.com. Thewellsreport@frontier.com. When you write me an email, please put the platform that you are watching this broadcast on in the subject line. If you're watching on Facebook, you want to send me an email, put Facebook. If you're watching on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, put that down so that I know it's you. Because I get, like everybody else, hundreds of emails every day, and I'm interested in yours. I don't want it to get lost in the din. So the president says that indeed Americans should vote for the status quo ante. In other words, we should vote for what's been going on. Are you comfortable with that? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. The president goes on to say that what we need to do is we need to stand up against lies, violence, and dangerous ultra MAGA election disruptors. So let me ask you this question. Who's responsible for the lies and the violence? Is it a man who's been out of office for 2 years? As the president has said? Is Donald Trump the reason for all the lies and violence? Or is it Democrat policymaking? As I pointed out on this broadcast many, many times, leftist politics, not so much Democrat, but certainly leftist politics, cannot exist in an honest context. There must be dishonesty. Is that the lie, or are those the lies he's talking about? Because those lies are self-generated. The president has been caught numerous times as a mouthpiece for the Democrat Party in outright lies. The most recent, of course, is that because of his leadership, America's Social Security recipients are getting a great big raise. Well, if you consider creating unprecedented inflation in the last 40 years as leadership, well, I guess the president can cling to that, but I really don't think he should. When he took over, inflation was 1.4%. As we come to this conversation, it's 8.2%. What will the next number say? Well, we'll find out. One thing is for sure, that the lame duck session of Congress, which will occur after Tuesday, will be perhaps one of the most lamest of lame duck sessions. And two, there's no telling what this Democrat Party that is shortly to lose power, apparently, we don't know, what this Democrat Party will do in their final few months. Our telephone number again, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Is democracy at stake? Who's responsible for lies and violence? Call us. This is The Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. The president says that democracy is at stake. My opinion is it's not democracy at all. It's democracy. The Democrat way of doing things has led this nation to a point where 70% of us believe the country's on the wrong track. The president's approval rating dramatically underwater, and has been. And the economy speaks for itself. Security absent at the southern border speaks for itself. Many of the things the Democrats have run on are far down on the priority list for Americans. And the president is trying to say that lies told years and years ago, or years ago, are somehow responsible for all of the political ills in the nation. Do you agree with any of that? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. And says that while he was given the speech about political violence being Donald Trump's fault, a Republican candidate was being accosted. Langston says this isn't about Democrats or Republicans. This is about truth and saving democracy. I disagree. I believe democracy is in fine hands. All you have to do is witness the number of people that are voting in this election. That is democracy at its best. And it's also democracy at its most real. No, I'll stick with my guns on that and say this is about saving democracy. And I'm not exactly sure it should be saved. Mike says not only was this a speech of anger and division and so on, but he also mentions it was a speech of desperation. You wonder why politics in the United States is more and more partisan, says Gary. Everything isn't about politics. It's about election lies, says Langston. Well, it depends on just exactly what lies you're talking about. President Biden has been caught in several election lies. Hillary Clinton has said that she denies her election. Stacey Abrams denies hers. There are a lot of people that deny elections. Strangely, it's only the ones that have done it from a Republican or right-wing standpoint. All that seems to be causing all these problems. The president again called out the ultra MAGA as a fringe of the Republican Party that's driving the entire party. There are two things there. First of all, he needs to define just exactly what someone who is ultra MAGA actually is. Because the people that believe in Make America Great Again, well, that's not a fringe of anything. That's a collection of 74 million American voters. 74 million. Roughly half the voting public. That's divisiveness at its very best. That's alienating half of the voting bloc. Let's see what else. Clinton and Obama, or Clinton said Obama are campaigning against Republican voters and not for the candidate they're with. That is correct. How can you tell the Democrat Party is in deep, deep trouble? They're trying to make their opposing party the issue in this election. With 8.2% inflation, the highest in 40 years. 40 years. The problem is not Republicans. The problem is Democrats. In this election, even the most casual analysis leads to the inescapable fact that democracy is doing just fine. But democracy is about to get its butt kicked. There's more. We'll share it with you. And we'll do that in very short order. As a matter of fact, right after this break at the bottom of the hour. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. Back with more in just a moment. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. It's what we do here. The news is the president is saying that democracy is at stake in the midterm elections. He says political violence and lies are essentially bringing democracy to its knees. He talked about ultra MAGA Republicans, saying that it's a fringe but the driving force behind the Republican Party. I'm sorry, I'm confused. How can a fringe be the driving force behind a political party? And when the president says that, is he also saying by implication that the leftist, progressive, socialist, anti-American, communist wing of the Democrat Party, certainly being a fringe of that party, is that the driving force behind the Democrat Party? Sure seems like it. It's truly amazing. The very same kinds of politicians around the world are espousing exactly what these people are espousing. That the entire the climate of this entire planet is going to kill us unless we pay politicians unbelievably huge amounts of money. They don't have any plan to actually fix the climate, except, of course, to get rid of everything that allows you to travel the country as you see fit, which is curtailing transportation, and free travel is just plain anti-American. Anyway, that being said, the president is worried about political violence, strangely against Democrats. He points out the Paul Pelosi attack. Okay. Did he point out the attacks against the Republicans? He seemed to be foursquare behind the attack on Brett Kavanaugh. You know, once again, there's a level of dishonesty here. Dishonesty that is easily identified with even the most casual search of recent news articles. So again, I'm kind of at a loss as to why the president is so concerned. But he's not the only one. He says election deniers are the problems. Okay, Hillary Clinton, Stacey Abrams. And by the way, I don't know why the president is so concerned about election deniers in the first place. Clearly, if what the mainstream media says about election deniers is true, if what the mainstream media believes is the best election in the history of the human endeavor, then all of these, the hundreds of election denying candidates, will easily be defeated, won't they? And if they're not easily defeated, and in fact, if they're elected, what does that tell you about the 2020 election? What it tells you is that not only are the hundreds of candidates running on a message that there was something wrong with the 2020 election, thousands, if not millions of voters are going to sustain that notion. What does that tell you? As I pointed out, the 2020 election had stark problems with it. Problems that cannot be explained away by partisan judges and dishonest counts. And when I say dishonest, I'm not talking about the fact that the people did not take the votes that they had and count them completely accurately. I'm sure they did. You see, the problem is, where did those votes come from? Where did those votes come from? Dinesh D'Souza came up with a film that's called 2,000 Mules. It's been widely debunked, says the mainstream media. Really? Who's it been debunked by? How is it debunked? You know, I go through hundreds of news articles every day. I haven't seen anything specific debunking 2,000 Mules. And oh, by the way, that these particular candidates who run on the idea of denied election or denying the 2020 election, if they're actually going to win their races, you know, it seems to me that what should have happened is that at least the research that was done by Dinesh D'Souza and shown in this film should have been a predicate for a little bit closer examination of just exactly how those voters, or excuse me, how those votes showed up in the first place. Not following the count. I'm sure the count was just fine. I mean, were there kind of weird statistical things we've never seen? Yes. Never seen them before, and something tells me we'll never see them again. So it was just an anomaly. It was just a fluke. You know, what's fascinating is that if somebody is elected on a fluke, if somebody's elected based on election voting curves that have never been seen before, you'd think they'd be less smug and arrogant about their election victory. They'd say, wow, I guess we were pretty lucky that time. Maybe they'd be a little bit more contrite about it, but no, not the case. And forget about the partisan idea that, well, the election was bogus, therefore our side lost. That's not the point. The point is because we never actually figured out where those votes came from. We never followed up those leads in a credible and comprehensive way. Not only are there candidates who deny the 2020 election, there are millions of voters who deny the 2020 election. And that was the huge error, and remains the huge error. Further moving forward, I am almost absolutely sure that Joe Biden will not run for re-election. He can't. Because if he does run for re-election, someone is going to have to explain why a guy who got 81 million votes in the 2020 election now doesn't even break 60 million. And so that is the state of play. But is democracy at stake? I don't know. Clinton and Obama are also talking about that too. We're going to be talking about that here in a minute. So Democrats that are going to be out of power following a lame duck session, Gary says they may lash out like a cornered animal. Maybe. Let's see. Wrong track. We've been derailed by Democracy, not democracy. Okay. Let's see. Someone points out that Hillary Clinton gave a concession speech and then went right back to saying that there was something wrong with the 2016 election. Let's see. Mike points out 74 million voters plus whatever illegals that vote Republican. Perhaps. MAGA does not mean Trump. It's 74 million that want to make America great again. True. Then Gary says, I'm going to go early vote. I've never voted early before. I've always voted on election day. It better count. Yeah, be safe. Yeah, let's see what else is going on. Langston says the President Biden called out both sides. Too little, too late. Cleo Marchese says, ballot harvesting. I just finished election judge training. We have a lot of new paperwork, including people who want to do curbside voting with 7 or more people in the vehicle. Interesting. I wonder why that's the case. It's so vague, it's meaningless. Well, yeah, the charges are vague and meaningless because he can't get very specific. Because if there's specificity involved, then he has to explain it. What are the specific facts? Like the ultra MAGA fringe group that is essentially driving the entire Republican Party. How do those two statements exist in a real environment? The answer is they don't. Democracy is at risk. True. And so what else is going on? President Obama. Let's talk a little bit about President Obama. In Phoenix, former President Barack Obama used a rally to deliver perhaps his most blunt warning about the stakes of next week's midterm elections for the American system of self-government. President Obama said this, speaking of specificity, if the Republican candidates in Arizona are successful, democracy as we know it may not survive here. Then he goes on to say that's not an exaggeration, that's a fact. Because victory for the GOP ticket, the former president proclaimed to a crowd of more than 1,000 people in a high school gymnasium. 1,000 people. How many people show up for a Trump rally? Anybody? Anyway, the former president, proclaiming to a crowd of more than 1,000 people in a high school gymnasium. Victory for the GOP would mean election deniers serving as your governor, your senator, your secretary of state, and your attorney general. Well, maybe the people of Arizona believe there was something wrong with the 2020 election. But surely that's not the case. Because the narrative is that all these people are crazy. Why would Americans vote for crazy people? I wouldn't worry about it. No one's going to say that an election denier can be elected in the United States in 2022. It's simply impossible. If you don't believe me, ask any Democrat. We've asked several. Ask any Democrat. There's no way. There's no way that anybody who's an election denier has any credibility, certainly not with voters. So what's the problem? Republican contenders for those posts have been more fervent than many GOP candidates elsewhere, embracing former President Donald Trump's false claims of widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election. They have promised to transform how elections are conducted in this crucial swing state. They promised that they would be able to implement if voters put them in charge of the state's election system. So if indeed voters put them in charge of the state election system, ergo, there must have been something wrong with the 2020 election in the mind of those voters. And you think about that in a context and in an atmosphere of Democrats saying that anybody that says the 2020 election was bogus is a liar, and the mainstream media doing just exactly what we just saw. Republican contenders for those posts have been more fervent than GOP candidates elsewhere, embracing former President Donald Trump's false claims that there was widespread fraud in the 2020 election. Well, maybe the people of Arizona, even after this onslaught of mainstream media denial, maybe they just didn't believe it. These are the issues. Then, of course, there is Hillary Clinton. In Politico today, she reiterates President Biden's message. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that Republicans pose real threats to our country, echoing President Biden's closing message ahead of next week's midterms. Quote, they're going after democracy and even counting votes that they think will help them and not others that won't. Interesting. I mean, those are real threats to individuals and our lives every day, and threats to our country. So let me ask you a question. Let's just cut to the chase here. Was the 2020 election real or not? And why? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. I find this fascinating that the president of the current Democrat president, the former Democrat president, and an unelectable Democrat presidential candidate all saying the same thing, but nobody seems to be believing them. They say all of this is, because democracy is at stake. And it's fascinating that they say that all the political violence is generated by that particular claim. Can someone explain to me again the comments by Chuck Schumer in front of the Supreme Court of the United States saying you don't know what will hit you if you overturn Roe v. Wade? And then a full-on assassination attempt of one of the justices? Another of the justices saying, my God, we have targets on our back. They were hoping to change the decision of the court by killing one of us, said Samuel Alito. And then they're trying to accuse people who are running for state offices in Arizona as election deniers. They're saying it's going to tear the entire fabric of democracy in the United States asunder. I'm sorry, just like everything else, you're going to have to come up with a better closing argument. That's my opinion. What's yours? Call us. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. So democracy is at stake. So says Hillary Clinton, former President Barack Obama, and President Joe Biden. Democracy is at stake. These are the same people who vociferously argued for the end of the Electoral College, that the President of the United States should be elected by a popular vote. Is that democracy? No, when you consider that most Americans live in large population centers run by Democrats, currently drowning in deadly crime, from one end of the country to the other. And it's fascinating that they talk about all of this political violence, and yet don't even consider bringing the Black Lives Matter riots of 2020 into the conversation. And once again, they're just shooting themselves in the foot because Americans who are voting, most assuredly, are bringing the BLM riots of 2020 into their conversation. But getting back to this popular vote thing, these are the people that say democracy is at stake, all the while spoiling to get rid of the Electoral College. The Electoral College guarantees that the president is elected by voters of the United States of America, not by a mob of voters in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, and many others. You see, there are more people living in New York than live in Wyoming. Should the people of Wyoming not have a say as to who the president is going to be? The Electoral College makes sure that Electoral College votes assigned to that state based on population go to a particular candidate. That way, the actual state has a say as to who the president is going to be. It's a brilliant system. Works beautifully. But it does get in the way of nonstop Democrat winning elections. And these are the people that say, well, the voters of Wyoming and North Dakota and South Dakota and Colorado, and none of these states actually matter. It's really only New York and the few populous states of the the Northeast, and the West Coast. Those are the only votes that really matter because that's enough to win a popular vote for president of the United States. No, I'm sorry. The democracy is at stake thing just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And what's fascinating to me is that I'm trying to figure out why it is that these people believe this messaging will even come close to working in the information age where there are lies. Okay, the president is talking about political lies. What bigger political lie is there beyond what I just discussed? The people worried about democracy yet perfectly willing to set aside the Electoral College. I mean, let's talk about all of this. Let's get this stuff out on the table and let's be truthful for a change. Because that's not where we are. It is simply not where we are. And that is not a creation of the people of the United States. It is a creation of the Democrat Party and a corrupt, leftist, biased media that sustains whatever the Democrat Party's latest delirium happens to be. The only glimmer of reality in that particular coverage, I'm talking about the mainstream media at this point, the only glimmer of reality in that is when people say, gosh, you know what? President Biden doesn't need to run. So every now and then there's just a little bit of a slap to the president, but not so much before the midterms. That rhetoric will probably very likely increase loudly after what promises to be, or what is being reported as, a sea change election in favor of Republicans. Which, by the way, is no great bargain either. Anyway, following this election, there will be calls, widespread, broad, and deep, that President Biden not run for re-election. George Will, a conservative commentator, called for not just Joe Biden to leave the presidential arena, but also to take Kamala Harris with him. He wanted both Biden and Harris to leave, leaving the Democrats with an opportunity to elect somebody or to nominate somebody who's electable? You see, there used to be a time when people could say things that were sustained by the mainstream media insofar as there were only 3 or 4 sources of mainstream media information. There are hundreds now, including this one. And yes, they tried to shut up all of us through censorship, through the social media front. Once again, these people are worried about democracy, but willing to censor their fellow Americans. This is hour one of the Wells Report. We've got hour number 2 coming up in just a couple of moments. Thanks for joining us today. North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We also make commentary, which is not news. That is simply my opinion. And what we're doing now is we are watching a live police chase involving a reckless driver who was driving near downtown Dallas, who was being followed by a white SUV and many police vehicles. He just got out of a following car, got out of his Dodge Charger, and got into a white SUV. He has now abandoned that vehicle at what looks like some kind of school or some kind of building. Let's join WFAA television and bring you this chase. I'll show this to you right here.
Ran into that building there, which we are confirming right now that this suspect has run into. All right, we've got 1, 2, 3 now. All right, Rebecca Lopez joins us now live by phone. Rebecca, you've been talking with contacts. What's the latest from your end?
This is live coverage from WFAA television in Dallas.
All right.
Of a reckless driving driver who abandoned his vehicle, got into a white SUV, and then jumped into a building. We don't know what that building is. We are joining WFAA television here in Dallas, Texas live.
We've got a very serious situation here. We have a suspect carrying a baby in a car seat who has run onto the campus of what we believe is a school, with several law enforcement officers running in behind that suspect. The suspect was the passenger in a white vehicle after having led law enforcement officers on a pursuit from Rockwall. They weaved in and out of neighborhoods in Dallas, and then picked up by the driver of another vehicle, a white vehicle, and ended up here at what we believe is a high school campus. This is all right. We believe that this campus is Early Head Start at Lake West. Okay, this is at Vickers with a B and Goldman Street. Rebecca, bring us up to speed with what you've learned from sources.
Well, I basically know kind of what you do because, typically most of my sources are Dallas police, but I was talking to an officer who said that it looks like the SWAT channel for DPD is getting active, and they may be bringing in Dallas SWAT, which would not be unusual in a situation like this. Apparently, this did start off as a stolen vehicle chase out of Rockwall that made its way through Garland and then into Dallas. So Dallas police will not chase a vehicle if it is not wanted for the person is not wanted for a violent felony, or they believe that that vehicle was used in a violent felony. So they would not necessarily get in. So you might have seen some police officers following without their lights and sirens, but that's because
all right. We believe, Rebecca, that the suspect is in custody. He is walking out peacefully, Rebecca, with several officers surrounding him. We can tell you that is the suspect who we saw enter the Early Head Start at Lake West campus, carrying a baby in the car seat. But the great news here so far is that that suspect seems to be behaving peacefully as he is taken into custody by several law enforcement officers here at Early Head Start at Lake West. Again, this is at Vickers and Goldman Street in the West Dallas area. Tanya Iser will be joining us here in just a few moments. She has a lot of contacts in law enforcement, but there you see that suspect who was initially driving a car, a stolen vehicle out of Garland, now being taken into custody, in police custody there at the Early Head Start at Lake West campus. And we believe that is the other suspect. The other suspect who was driving the vehicle, the second vehicle involved in this chase, he had picked up the first suspect. When the first suspect came to a stop, he jumped into the white vehicle driven by that second suspect there, and they ended up here in West Dallas, Tanya. Have you been able to talk with any law enforcement officers?
No, honestly, Izzy, I was back there working on something else when they came and grabbed me. This is a pretty wild scene. I don't know that I've seen one in a long time where you have a baby and a car and them chasing a stolen vehicle. You know, in Dallas, they've got a pretty strict chase policy. If this chase had started in Dallas, they don't chase stolen vehicles. So, but of course, we don't. It'd be nice to know a little bit more details about like how this chase started. You know, was it just the stolen vehicle? Does this child belong to this man? Like, what's the child's connection in all this?
And we don't know how the child is doing right now because he entered that building with the child. He exited without the child, without the baby. My prayer is that the baby is fine. We will give you an update on that baby as soon as we learn it.
All right, so that chase has come to an end, but certainly the person involved or the people involved appear to be in very, very serious trouble and will very likely end up spending an awful lot of time incarcerated, which we will find out more about that and report that to you. And so that is breaking news, and we brought that to you courtesy of WFAA Television. We sincerely appreciate their willingness to allow us to share that video with you. Some breaking news on the Wells Report as we begin this second hour of our broadcast today. We've been talking a little bit about President Biden's speech. That was last hour on the broadcast. We are also talking about the changing political climate here in the United States. Something that has been something that's being talked about on USA Today. They talk a little bit about Turning Point USA and what they call the remaking of Arizona's Republican Party. Now, keep something in mind. In a rally just days ago, President Obama said that if indeed election-denying Arizona political candidates are elected, it could be a shattering of American democracy, which seems to be a selective and indeed perhaps disinformational assessment of what's going on in the United States. Clearly, the political climate in this nation has changed. And what we have now is we have the mainstream media doing their absolute dead level best to cover that change. And this again from USA Today. The buzz among attendees at the 2019 meeting of the Arizona Republican Party was that the machines being used to vote for their party chair could not be trusted, and that instead everyone should state their preferences out loud in a voice vote. At the end of that process, Kelly Ward, a former U.S. Senate candidate who twice could not escape the Republican primary, became leader of the party that she felt had shunned her. The Arizona Republic would report weeks after her election that there were two people with connections to Turning Point USA, the umbrella name given to a group of organizations whose political clout within the Arizona Republican Party had grown in recent years. The employees who served as unofficial advisors to Ward were Tyler Bauer, and Jake Hoffman. Hoffman was the former communications and media director for Turning Point USA. He also ran a company called Rally Forge. It was paid more than $1 million by Turning Point USA. In 2020, Facebook banned Rally Forge from its site because its investigation found the company created fake profiles to comment on news stories ahead of the election. Bauer served as the chief operating officer for both the nonprofit charity Turning Point USA and the related advocacy group Turning Point Action. The Republic reported that Bauer worked at his own time, not on Turning Point's. In an interview, Bauer declined to detail what he did to help Kelly Ward. Her election as chair of the Arizona Republican Party would prove to be consequential. It deepened a seismic divide within the party. One side stood on the establishment members who had supported the likes of former U.S. Senators John McCain and John Kyle. On the other were those who pledged loyalty to then President Donald Trump. Under Ward's leadership, the party would take a hard right turn and upend convention, political convention. And that is exactly what is going on. Indeed, political convention is being set aside by members of the political process. Again, not a destruction of democracy, but a result of it. Something being denied by presidents and high party officials of both parties because it does upset the status quo ante. In other words, the way things have always been. So it would take sides within primaries tilting toward candidates who espoused conspiracies, including the myth of a stolen 2020 election. Again, this is USA Today trying to tell a story that apparently has gotten no traction with many, many voters across the nation. There are hundreds of 2020 election deniers running for office. And now we're taking a look at the actual backlash of that, or the actual parsing out of how this happened, because they're trying to seek to, A, define these people as a threat to democracy in the United States, when in reality, to this observer, it believes it's just a product of democracy in the United States. And so, once again, the mainstream media is essentially finding itself in a position where it's losing the argument that was a political creation. And now we have to say, okay, so the conspiracy of problems with the 2020 election, that is a political machination. That is a conspiracy theory. And yet what we're doing right now is we're saying that, what they are saying rather, that the fact that these people have taken control, in their words, of the Arizona Republican Party, that suddenly the entire nation, the entire democracy is at stake. What is that? That's panic. This is only one state in the union. And clearly, as we said this last hour, every part of the mainstream media has denied that there was any problem whatsoever with the 2020 election. And they've done so for 2 years. The actual political process, these people in the United States political process, they're making it abundantly clear again that the 2020 election was just fine. But that message isn't getting to the voters. And now what they're doing is accusing the conspirators of yet another grand conspiracy? Or maybe they're just being left behind by a voting public that is frustrated not just with the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, but both parties. Something we've also spent a lot of time talking about on this broadcast. There's more. It's coming up in just a couple of moments. Meantime, our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. What do you think? What do you hear? Give us a call. We'll be back in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. We've been reporting the mainstream media now saying that Donald Trump is essentially co-opting the entire nation and in the process destroying democracy. How did Donald Trump get all that power? How is it that Donald Trump is able to be the object of the Democrat Party angst and thus the angst of the mainstream media? How can it be that a president who spent 4 years in office with 95% of all the news being reported about his presidency was negative? How can that person still be a political force in these United States? How can that happen? 74 million people voted for him in 2020. He lost the election. And everybody, of course, from one end of the country to the other, including the mainstream media, says, well, that was the best election ever. No president has ever been elected with 81 million votes. President Obama was elected with 67 million votes. Of course, Joe Biden was his vice president. The next election, President Obama was elected with 65 million votes. But the entire time, the real political power was Joe Biden getting 81 million votes. Chances are very likely the vote total for Donald Trump is very honest, especially when you consider that suddenly this President Trump had gotten more votes than any other sitting president for re-election in the history of the nation. See, these are the problems with the 2020 election that nobody bothers to explain. So we go to our chat room. Obviously, Trump and his acolytes attempted to disenfranchise 11 million voters and overturn the will of 81 million citizens. Well, the only thing I can say about that is that those 81 million voted in 2020. As I look at the calendar, it seems to be 2022. So we're on to the next thing. Alan points out that the article that I just read was from the Arizona Republic. Gannett owns the Arizona Republic and republished it in the USA Today, which they also own. USA Today publishes it. They own it. And so it is the mainstream media reporting all of this. Individuals. Okay, so once again, we have the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, wielding this incredible amount of political power in the United States. How did he get that power? Langston comes back with, well, individuals like me gave him that power and refused to acknowledge that he lost. Two problems with that. Near as I can tell, there are probably somewhere around 6,000 people that watch this broadcast every day. I'm not sure that I had that much to do with it. So let's move directly to Fox News. Fox News wasn't especially a Trump supporter either. Was that network? No. And so, okay, once again, I'm still trying to figure out why it is that Donald Trump has all this political power. Who gave it to him? People like me? How many of us are there? A dozen? I mean, lots and lots of people watch Fox News, but that's only about 2 or 3 million people, if that many, maybe more like 1 or 2 million people. So how did Donald Trump get all this power? How is it that he is single-handedly, apparently, on the brink of destroying American democracy? I think it gets back to destroying American democracy. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. The President of the United States blames ultra MAGA people, who he still hasn't defined, as the big problem in the United States. People that have pushed the United States to the brink of destruction of democracy. Echoed by former President Barack Obama. Echoed by never President Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump seems to be the big problem because he's the guy that came up with MAGA in the first place. Make America great again. The intellectual bankruptcy, the obvious intellectual bankruptcy of someone being a threat to the United States who wants to make America great again, on the part of politicians who disagree vehemently with the idea, apparently, of making America great again. It should be MADA, I guess, for those people. Make America Democrat again. They say that this is a threat against democracy. I say it's a threat against democracy. Well, once again, let's look at the reality. 95% of the news coverage of Donald Trump was negative. How does he have this political power? He lost what has been called the most contested presidential election in the history of the United States. Lost it. How does he have all this political power? People, by the way, said that it was individuals like me that refused to acknowledge that he lost. I acknowledged he lost. I don't know where that comes from. I guess it's that selective hearing that so many people that are trying to explain the unexplainable or defend the indefensible. I guess it's that selective hearing you've got to develop in order to maintain whatever facade you happen to be sharing. Because it certainly is a facade. President Obama says a handful of Arizona Republican candidates who deny the 2020 election could destroy democracy in the United States. How? In other words, this hysteria surrounding the idea that the entire house of cards built around a 2020 election that many people, including millions of voters, disagree with, seem to be tumbling down. It will very likely take the Democrat Party with it, along with a substantial portion of the mainstream media, if not all of it. How can this be? The mainstream media itself says the 2020 election was perfect. In every paragraph of every news article, it is editorialized in reporting that supposedly journalism, but is actually propaganda. That it's a false premise, it's a lie, it's wrong that anybody who believes that the 2020 election wasn't completely perfect, well, they're just lost. Well, apparently they may be lost, but they still seem to have plenty of political clout, because it looks like these people are going to win more elections than they lose. How can this be? And once again, I will tell you, it's because we didn't do enough to actually prove the realities of the 2020 election. Now, I didn't say prove that the election was faulty. I just said prove the results. And it started in the days after the election when I said, Joe Biden, you need to agree with President Trump and get to the bottom of all of these voter anomalies. And there are plenty of them reported on the mainstream media. And then quickly shunted aside because the right guy won. I told you. I said, the president needs to say, I agree with President Trump. We need to look at this very carefully. If he had done that, he'd actually be the uniter of the nation, especially if he'd actually win the election. Why didn't he do that? He didn't do that because he was afraid he was going to lose. Why? 74 million 81 million, that's 7 million votes. That's a pretty big cushion. Why would you think you would lose under those circumstances? Meantime, the entire propagandist machine politicians and machine mainstream media have been disavowing anybody who says the election was a problem. But that doesn't seem to have gotten very far, at least in the minds of the voters. So once again, how did President Trump maintain all this political power that he's accused of possessing? By the way, just as an aside, I said that 95% of the news coverage on President Trump was negative. 87% of the news coverage is still negative against both Donald Trump and the Republican Party. How? I mean, if the mainstream media is not biased, how could this be? The answers are right there in front of you. They're right there in front of you. Am I a part of this grand conspiracy? No, I'm reporting on it. This is what actual journalism sounds like, especially journalism in a propagandist context. This is journalism in a context where the mainstream media has lost its credibility. Witness the fact that all of these things are happening. Nobody's paying attention to the mainstream media anymore. They blew their credibility with most of the people of the United States. Somebody says you can at least follow Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, Adam, what's his name? I forgot. Kinzinger. They placed country over MAGA nonsense. Really? What are their political aspirations following this next election and this next term? Oh, that's right. They've lost their jobs. Why? Why is that? If they're right, if they placed country over MAGA nonsense, how did they lose their jobs? Once again, we're asking questions. How does Donald Trump have all this political power? How did Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger lose their jobs? Mike says the reason that Donald Trump has all this political power is because he lives in the heads of 81 million people and very likely the mainstream media. Trump and his acolytes attempted to disenfranchise 11 million voters and overturn the will of 81 million citizens. That will was expressed in 2020, with 70% of Americans believing the country is on the wrong track. Would President Biden receive another 81 million votes in his reelection? Once again, I'm just asking a question. You do realize the U.S. population grows every year. Yeah, I know. I talked about it yesterday, 331 million, as I recall. That doesn't explain what I pointed out, which was Barack Obama got 67 million votes in 2008, 65 million votes in 2012, and the population didn't grow that much. And says, JD, the way Democrats fear Trump, the reason that Democrats fear Trump so much has me wondering as well. He was a Democrat most of his life. Is the fear because he knows where the bodies are buried? Fox News is being sued for their blind support. Okay. In 2008, Obama got 69.5 million votes. Did I say 67? Okay, 69. Individuals like me were the first-time voters in 2020. Simple answer, the population grew. Not that much. Not that much. Are you saying that suddenly we had 20 million more voters voting Democrat only? Really? Is that it? Huh. Somehow that doesn't wash. 95% of the things that President Trump did were negative, says Alan. Really? Like what? 95%, that's most things, right? So putting up the wall on the southern border was negative. Having more people go to work in the best economy we've had in decades was negative. Setting records, some of which still stand, that minority workers had jobs that they'd never had before in percentages we'd never seen before. That was negative. Getting us out of pointless, endless wars, that was negative. By the way, I happen to agree. I think that was negative because look at what we have now. I'm focusing on the election and ignoring the attempted coup. Which attempted coup? Are you talking about the January 6th peaceful protest at the Capitol building where no Wendy's got burned down? Nobody stole washing machines. Nobody hit little old ladies with 2x4s. Nobody kicked people to death in the streets. Is that the coup you're talking about? Or are you talking about the head of the secret police in the United States? The head of the intelligence agency of the United States? The head of the Department of Homeland Security of the United States? The head of the FBI in the United States, the secret police, and all of his acolytes? Are you talking about that coup? Where they tried to remove Donald Trump from office and disenfranchise the voters who put him in office in the first place? Are you talking about that coup? Or are you talking about this supposed coup on January 6th? Which is it? Mike says it's corporate media. No, it's not corporate media. It's Democrat media. Why didn't Trump cite with facts all the fraudulent votes? Well, because he did, and tried to. But the judges where he brought suit said he didn't have standing. Well, how convenient. And by the way, it doesn't make any difference whether anybody has a problem with the 2020 election. It stands. It stands. But what I'm pointing out is that people don't believe it. And apparently, those people are in the majority when it comes to electing people who also don't believe it. I'm just pointing out facts here. Let's see, the population of the United States has grown 5 million since 2020. No, do you mean 2010? I had those stats up here. I haven't had a chance to look. It was 70 million in 2008. An additional 11 million voters is reasonable. Really. Here's the January 6th pivot. There was a coup on January 6th. Well, how come it wasn't called a coup? I mean, an insurrection is a little less powerful than a political coup, wouldn't you think? And by the way, when it comes to political coups, how does that go? Let's see, is it like 15,000 people that show up at the Capitol with 800 of them being arrested and an even smaller number of people that actually had anything to do with what is being called an insurrection? Let's round the numbers up, 1,000 people. Is that a political coup? You know, because every political coup I've ever seen involved the secret police, the intelligence agencies, the departments of Homeland Securities in those countries overthrowing a government. The military, for example. Did we see any of that in this January 6th coup? No. Did we see that when they tried to remove President Trump from office? Yes. Once again, I'm just going through the chat room here and trying to come up with an answer. Trying to come up with the answer of how does President Trump have all this political power? A man that can single-handedly, apparently, bring the entire United States democracy to its knees, to destroy it. How does he have that political power? Let's see, Trump cases were kicked out because they had no merit. Okay, so there's no problem then. So nobody believes that there's any problem with the 2020 election. The mainstream media has reported that there was no problem. As a matter of fact, they sunder anybody who disagrees with them. So no problem then, right? Then why are these hundreds of political candidates on the brink of electoral victory? How does all this work? And I want you to explain it. I want you to explain it. And by the way, while you're at it, and since we're talking about it, right? Let's see, who directed citizens to overrun the Capitol? SCOTUS judges, his wife, the alternative state certificates, senators support. Okay, now you're babbling. Why? Because you don't have any answers. Who led the insurrection? You mean the guy that was driving back to the White House and said, take me to the Capitol? And the Secret Service said no? Why didn't they take him to the Capitol? He probably would have stopped the entire thing. My fellow citizens, get off the Capitol grounds. Out right now. That's not what I meant. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. People have often asked me, John David, how come these people that obviously spin tales that have very serious credibility problems, how come they don't upset you? How come you don't get mad? I don't have to get mad. All I have to do is ask questions. By the way, you notice I'm not answering them for them. I'm just asking the questions. For example, Langston says that Donald Trump is single-handedly responsible for the insurrection on January 6th. Yeah. Then I said, why didn't the Secret Service take him to the Capitol? He very likely would have stopped the whole thing. because it was clearly not going the way he thought. Well, no, he went back to the White House and watched for 3 hours without saying anything. And then suddenly we have the fact that he was tweeting. And that was turned down by Twitter king Jack Dorsey. More censorship? So anyway, we get back to, okay, it's an insurrection led by President Trump. Let's just say that's true. Let's just say it's all true. It doesn't answer why Donald Trump still has the political power that he has. Far more of his endorsed candidates have won in elections since 2020. How could that possibly be? No answer. So anyway, let's see. I keep asking these questions. And then the person who's asking all the questions, time to go. This is insanity, ultra mega insanity. What part of what I've been doing is insane? All I'm doing is asking questions, linear logical questions, based on everything that I know. How does this man have all this political power? When obviously he's a jackass. He tries this half-baked insurrection. It gets shoved up his nose. There's a January 6th committee that spends months, years, trying to prove this president is the ringleader of an American revolution. Not much of a revolution. 800 people arrested. 800. Most of them are out. Most of them never charged. But somehow, this is a guy who has political power that threatens the Democrat Party so badly and threatens the mainstream media political machine so badly. This after 95% of their work being negative, trying to slaughter the president in place, President Trump. And yet this guy has all this amazing power and is the biggest threat to the Democrat Party in the history of the party itself. So how is that? And how's that ultra mega insanity? It's not ultra mega insanity. It's a series of questions. Not based on my assertions. They're based on your assertions. So what's the point? The point is, we do know the American media is biased. We know that the American media has been biased for a very, very long time. We know that they are the handmaiden of the Democrat National Committee. We know all of these things. We know that they bombarded President Trump for years. They impeached him twice. They were unsuccessful both times. There was a real coup among the agencies involved with the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security, that nearly 100 former intelligence officers signed a letter saying that what was then proven to be an absolute hoax, the Steele dossier, was genuine. The FBI actually lied to the FISA court and was busted by the FISA court for those lies. The judge saying, why would I ever believe the FBI again? Why would any of us ever believe the FBI again? CIA, intelligence, FBI, law enforcement, Department of Homeland Security, arguably the secret police, all involved in trying to remove Donald Trump from office. And yet, this man still wields amazing power. And on top of all of that, he loses the 2020 election by 7 million votes. Did I leave out anything? How is Donald Trump still standing? How is he this gigantic threat to the United States of America? I'm waiting for answers. And the person says, too much mega insanity. It's time to go. Okay. By the way, does that mean I won the argument? Which is funny because I wasn't arguing. I was just asking questions. Which tells you the paper thin reality behind all these statements in the first place. They don't withstand even the most casual examination by a guy sitting in a studio in his house in Fort Worth, Texas. This is the Wells Report. Hour number 3 is coming up. So there you go. We'll be back in just a second. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news, honestly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We report both. In other words, we de-propagandize the news. I make commentary. That's not the news, nor is it propaganda. It's just my opinion. An opinion that you are more than welcome to disagree with and debate, which is why we do news, analysis, commentary, and debate. Monday through Friday, most weeks. Occasionally I have other things to do, but Monday through Friday, live from 2 until 5 Central Time. And whenever you feel like bringing us up on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble. By the way, if you're watching Rumble, this is a show that was done earlier today. And if you would like to interact, please send me an email. The email is thewellsreport@frontier.com. If you write me an email, please, by all means, in the subject line, put the platform that you're watching on so that I know it's you. Because like everybody else, I get hundreds of emails every day, and I have to sift through the ones I want, which are the ones you send. Please do. Last hour, we had a very good discussion about why it is that Donald Trump has all this political power after being sundered by the press for 4 years, impeached twice. The so-called ringleader of a so-called insurrection that failed. A man attempted to disgrace him the entire time. They still do. Well, how is it that he still has all this amazing political power? So amazing, in fact, that the government of the United States, not the people of the United States seem to be foursquare behind this man. How is that? Nobody was able to answer those questions last hour. If you have answers, get in touch with me. Call me on the phone, 817-379-2172. Leave a message, and I'll get back to you. I'll put you right on the air, and you can explain everything. Explain how a guy who has been absolutely ridiculed for the last 6 years still wields so much political power that the government is still trying to remove him from eligibility to run again for president. Explain it. And that's what this show is all about. I think this is a really good broadcast. I really do. Let's see what else is going on. Are you still going to the open house? Which open house? I'm sorry. I've slept since then. Let's see. We're going. Steph is excited to see their tools. You have to remind me. I'm kind of clueless on that, Mikey. So do that, would you please? There is other news, and I guess arguably we got sidetracked in the second hour. So let's get back to some of the things that we were planning on talking about. For example, what about the people of the United States and their political parties? Let me give you an example of a news article that came out today. A lifelong Democrat clergy leader is denouncing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she is urging Hispanics to support her opponent, who's a Republican in Queens. Oh, yeah. So whoever the opponent is, they must be the only non-socialist communist in Queens these days. The quote is from this lifelong Democrat clergy leader, quote, "We are fed up," unquote. This from Fox News. A former New York City council member and state senator has joined the list of lifelong Democrats turning their backs on Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and New York Governor, Democrat Kathy Hochul, and throwing their support behind New York Republicans. Ocasio-Cortez's own constituents heckled her for her radical agenda during a recent town hall event, and she showed some real moxie. She started dancing to the chants. It was cute. She's cute. She really is. She's cute, and she knows it, and she'll tell you all about her juicy booty. So let me see if I got this straight. Let me see. So if I talk about her juicy booty, then I'm a misogynist, sexist pig. But if she talks about her juicy booty, it's what? One of the confusing things about being a man in this enlightened new age of what? Hashtag Me Too? And yeah, I'm not going to say it, but it has something to do with another term for the hashtag symbol. Yeah. Anyway, you're a coward. You're a progressive socialist. You have done nothing, one speaker shouted at this rally for AOC. Tulsi Gabbard has shown guts where you've shown cowardice. I believed in you, and you became the very thing you sought to fight against. Reverend Ruben Diaz echoed the disdain for Ocasio-Cortez and her policies. Thursday on Fox News, he told Todd Pirro she had lost support from Hispanics some time ago. She lost me a long time ago when she opposed 25,000 jobs that Amazon wanted to bring to her district in New York. Diaz said that Ocasio-Cortez Amazon opposition was only one of the reasons he decided to throw his support behind her Republican challenger, Tina Forte, citing the anti-police and open border stances, among others. Quote, progressives were releasing criminals on the street, favoring open borders, allowing all kinds of people to come through the borders without checking on them. She opposes police officers in the subways, he said. Diaz, who also serves as president of the New York Hispanic Clergy Association, told Pirro that Hispanics are walking away from Ocasio-Cortez and her radical policies and looking to her opponent. Now, this is being reported by Fox News, and it's biased. But that's essentially a precursor to this from CNBC, hardly a bastion. NBC News, of course, hardly a bastion of conservative thought or journalism. Here's what they say. A study by Pew Research found that 61% of U.S. adults today find Republicans unfavorable, the Republican Party unfavorable. 57% shared the same sentiment toward the Democrat Party. About a quarter of Americans say they have an unfavorable view of both major parties. That's a considerable jump from 6% in 1994. Experts suggest the two-party system could be blamed for the political polarization we find in America. Absolutely. And once again, how can that be when the mainstream media is foursquare behind the Democrat Party? How can it be? That's another one of those questions that I'm hoping you'll answer if you disagree with the idea that questions like mine are somehow, what, out of bounds? They're just questions. Some experts suggest the two-party system could be blamed for political polarization we find in America. I don't think that's a suggestion. I think that's an outright reality. It's a two-party system, and you have to pick one side or another, says Lee Drutman, the senior fellow at New America. If we're in a situation where one party believes the other party winning the election would be so disastrous to the country that maybe we should intervene to prevent the other party from winning, then you really don't have a democracy anymore anyway. It's true. This is all just basic logic here. There's no conspiracy. These are just true statements. Just true statements. More than half of America, 56%, believe the current parties do such a poor job that a third major party is needed. This according to a survey by Gallup polling. Indeed, minor parties are seeing an uptick in support and interest in recent years. I have said on this broadcast, the United States of America needs the Conservative Party of the United States, a party that believes in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the definition of America as told by the Declaration of Independence, and the explanations of the basic documents by the people who wrote them, the Federalist Papers. I believe that a political party needs to represent the government described in the Constitution. The Republican Party certainly doesn't believe in that. The Democrat Party is doing their absolute dead level best to dismantle it. As I've said time and time again, we have two parties in the United States. One party that operates in spite of the American people, one party that ignores the American people. And oh, by the way, both parties ignore the Constitution, both parties ignore the Bill of Rights. And yeah, you'll say, now, wait a minute, hold on, the Republican Party, they stand for the Bill of Rights and so on and so forth. Yeah, but what do they do about it? They talk a good game, but what do they actually do? Not so much. We've seen a lot of support translated to grassroots support where people are not just checking a box every 4 years, according to Angela McArdle, the chair of the Libertarian National Committee, the third largest political party in the U.S. They actually want to get engaged and get involved in the local level and to really see individualism and freedom flourish in their own communities. Yeah. How many polls have I reported on this broadcast that say time and time and time again that the biggest threat to freedom and liberty in the United States, I dare say democracy, is the American government itself? It happens over and over. Again, this is not some partisan screed that I'm throwing at you. This is the news. And so what we have here is we have more than half of Americans believe that Democrats and Republicans are useless. What do you believe? This particular polling says that Americans are looking for another party. Most assuredly. Most assuredly. The Democrat Party has killed itself. Absolutely committed suicide. They didn't get rid of the socialists, and they lost the nation-inspiring charter as described by John Fitzgerald Kennedy, their party icon from 1961 in his inauguration speech. What happened? One of my dearest friends in the entire world, Gary Olivier, says both parties are full of it. I liken our current federal government to professional wrestling. It's all scripted. They do nothing but benefit themselves. A government of the government, by the government, for the government. A government of politics, for politics, by politics. It's true. That's how we find ourselves today. Once again, I'm not making this up. This is based on a couple of news articles. And by the way, congressional approval has been in the dumper ever since I've been doing the Wells Report. It's finally catching up. Democrats have destroyed themselves. Republicans, likewise, have destroyed themselves. Both parties are useless. Both parties are not doing the will of the people, the business of the people of the United States. And the only person that gave us a glimmer of hope is a guy who is ridiculed beyond all measure. And that's Donald Trump. This is the Wells Report. More is coming up next. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. We're talking about American politics. We are 6 days away. Actually, 5 days away. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. 5 days away from the most consequential midterm election in my lifetime. People are saying, we have to have term limits in this government. Well, we're about to see term limits in this government. Finally. Takes a long time for the people of the United States to finally decide to make a decision that is not what they make over and over and over again. Because we live in an age of easily available information and, shall we say, avant-garde sources of news, not unlike this one. I don't consider this to be an avant-garde news channel. I just consider it to be a real news channel. I'm talking about the Wells Report. So what we see is we see all of these bold statements that usually were allowed to exist and in most recent times sustained by the news media. We're seeing all of it fall apart because people have their own sources of information. In other words, our communication is better than it's ever been. Ever. And what we're about to see is we're about to see that communication. And oh, by the way, the hindrance of that communication through social media and all of the gigantic mistakes made by Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all the things that we're watching this broadcast on right now. What we're seeing is this amazing change. The status quo ante, the political machine, absolutely horrified at what's going to happen next. They should be. But they have no one to blame but themselves. At the top of the list from a media standpoint is CNN. CNN has gotten to the point where the term limits of Jeff Zucker gone. Somebody said, hey, we got to get back to journalism, and they took over. Chris Licht is the guy's name. Made big changes. He took Don Lemon out of a broadcast and put him on the morning show. It's called CNN This Morning. Now, there's a news article from Fox News, which is biased on this, and says Don Lemon's CNN This Morning debuts to dismal ratings. Well, of course. It's a brand new show. And Don Lemon destroyed his credibility as a journalist with the shows he did before he moved to the new show. The launch of CNN This Morning attracted 387,000 total viewers. Well, this is what happens when you destroy a network by being lousy, by forgetting what you're supposed to be doing, by turning your entire network over to a bunch of people that spoil for the end of a presidency of someone duly elected by the people of the United States and somehow saying that those people were wrong. But I don't often stand up for people like Don Lemon, and most certainly specifically with Don Lemon. And the reason is because I think he's taken a wonderful opportunity and turned it into garbage. But he's got a brand new show. And that brand new show is on a network that destroyed itself. He destroyed his credibility. The network destroyed its credibility. And it's going to take a very long time before CNN is a player ever again. And that's if they straighten themselves out right now. It'll be 10 years before CNN is worth watching again. If they start right now. I hope they do. I hope Chris Licht is successful. And in point of fact, I also hope that Don Lemon is successful because I hope he's going to learn something from what he has been up to. I wonder. More of the Wells Report coming up next. The last half hour of this broadcast for today. Stick with it. It's coming up. Stay where you are. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. The email address you can use is The Wells Report, all one word, at frontier.com. If you send me an email, make sure that in the subject line you put the name of the platform that you're watching it on. If you're watching it on Facebook, put Facebook there. If you're watching it on Rumble, put Rumble there. Likewise with YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Just let me know, because I want to answer whatever query or comment on whatever you have to say, because this show's interactive. The invitation is there. Not a lot of people take it, but the invitation is there nonetheless. You are welcome to be a part of this broadcast anytime you choose. So please, by all means, please choose to do so. We've been talking a little bit about the realities of American politics coming up to the 2022 election. It's really fascinating, actually. A guy that's been discredited, shamed, vilified, impeached, now faces the possibility of an indictment, of all things, on the same information that he was impeached on twice, and nobody got anywhere. You got to say, boy, I'll tell you, man, when the swamp wants to get somebody, they have a long attention span, especially in light of repeated, embarrassing failures. Well, what's fascinating to me is that since President Trump came down the escalator for the first time in Trump Tower in New York, that all of these people have been exposed simply by his presence. The Republican Party was exposed as not being a people of the party in any way, shape, or form. The Democrat Party was exposed as being completely anti-American. Executive branch agencies, the FBI, the IRS, Department of Homeland Security, CIA, all as would-be kingmakers exposed by this populist who was elected by the people of the United States, who decided to fire the two major political parties. Have they still gotten the news? Have they gotten the news yet? The answer is probably no. Which is why today we just reported that Americans are absolutely not enamored with the two parties we have. And many are calling for a third, a different one. But once again, I've also pointed out that the mainstream media is essentially a stenography service for the Democrat National Committee. The Hill is the latest one to impale itself on that idea through an op-ed piece by Myra Adams. She writes, a convergence of forces threatens to crack the Constitution's solid foundation upon which our nation has thrived. Pressure emanating from this powerful convergence could cause tectonic plate shifts, impacting and destabilizing equal justice, the rule of law, and government authority. I'm sorry, do we have equal justice? Yes or no? Do we have the rule of law? Yes or no? Just a point of opinion, I believe we have the rule of politics. We certainly don't have equal justice. And government authority? You mean totalitarian authority disguised as government authority. Is that what you're talking about? At risk is our traditionally respected electoral system, along with peaceful transfer of power that helped make this the oldest continuous democracy and the envy of the world. Well, now wait a minute. A traditionally respected electoral system? You mean all those people that were spoiling for the end of the Electoral College are a part of this traditionally respected electoral system? Sounds to me like a bunch of radicals trying to turn the entire leadership of the United States of America over to people who live on both coasts in cesspools of crime, the cities in which they live. That's what it looks like to me. Intensifying the pressure is a partisan media in which truth is pliable based on the audience's political leanings, reflecting our hyper-polarized electorate, where facts and alternative facts are equally valid. Who's more guilty of that? Would you say the conservative media or the liberal media? Both are guilty. Which of those two are more guilty? This is the national backdrop for two earth-shaking decisions expected after the midterm elections. In one corner, former President Trump declares his decision to launch a 2024 presidential campaign, which, by the way, hasn't happened yet. In the other, Attorney General Merrick Garland announcing whether the Department of Justice will pursue an indictment of citizen Trump. Which decisive event will occur first? It could be consequential to the advancement of a successful message branding narrative while forcing the other into a defensive posture. Either way, and this is where things begin to fray, Myra Adams says Americans should brace themselves for turmoil mirroring pre-Civil War levels of hatred and mayhem with the potential for violence. Okay, so let me ask you a little question here. Talk to me about the turmoil, the hatred, the mayhem before the Civil War. What were they fighting about? Was it slavery? No, because there were just as many slaves north of the Mason-Dixon line, if not more, than there were south of the Mason-Dixon line. So it wasn't slavery. What were they fighting about? Oh, that's right. A bunch of people in the southern states decided that they wanted to form their own country, the Confederacy. And so they did. And the Union said, not so fast. And there was a war. That war was the beginning of all kinds of hatred and mayhem. That's true. It lasted, well, up until about, 20, 30 years ago? Anyway, and there certainly was violence. So Americans should brace themselves for turmoil mirroring pre-Civil War levels of hatred and mayhem with the potential of violence. Like, say, for example, the violence and mayhem and hatred that we saw during the 2020 BLM riots? Murders in the street on video. No one captured. No FBI wanted posters. Nothing. Ms. Adams points out that the major survey associated with Yale University found that among American adults, 50.1%, agreed that in the next few years there will be a civil war in the United States. That begs the question, could a DOJ indictment of Trump be a spark? Sure, could be a spark. So could the attempt of, say, for example, confiscating weapons. I guarantee you that there'd be a civil war, and it would be a short one. Because the number of people in the United States that don't believe there should be weapons is a particle of the United States population. The next civil war will last days, if there is one. And so the two announcements, will Donald Trump declare that he's running for president in 2024, or will he be indicted first? Which of those two things will happen first? Political history is made when the twice impeached former president who twice lost the popular vote declares his intention to run for a second term. According to recent poll averages, Trump's chances are 50-50 against his assumed opponent, President Biden. Many people believe that Trump would run to avenge his 2020 loss, which he still insists he won. Equally plausible, he could run to boost his now damaged but once respected Trump brand while he's embroiled in the numerous complex legal challenges. You know, sort of like the impeachments, sort of like the Mueller investigation. By declaring his candidacy ahead of a possible DOJ indictment, Trump could hope to accomplish the following: rally his base and juice the right-wing media machine with messages that Trump is unbeatable against slow Biden. The right-wing media machine versus the left-wing media machine. Which is bigger? Which has a louder voice? The other thing he could do is assume that Trump can and will intimidate potential primary opponents into dropping out before they officially declare. Well, that's probably likely. Yeah. But why would they? Why wouldn't they let Donald Trump take the slings and arrows and so on and so forth and defeat Joe Biden, which is a sure cinch? It's absolutely a sure cinch. Or why wouldn't they look at the possibility that here's a damaged guy, sundered and shamed and vilified ever since he came down that staircase or that escalator in Trump Tower, and finally say, well, all of that damage is finally going to take hold. Well, you know what? It's probably not going to take hold, and that's why they would pull out. Trump could strategically hover over the crowd of 2024 GOP hopefuls, but not join them. For example, Trump declined an invitation to the annual Republican Jewish Coalition Conference in Las Vegas, November 18th and 19th. All the prospective GOP candidates will be at the major donor cattle call, except King Trump, she says sardonically, who expects to be crowned without a primary fight. No to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Bring Trump's crown, make it a joke, and generate headlines. No, we don't have kings. We don't. And then, of course, President Trump could announce before Thanksgiving. The former president likely believes he'll ward off a DOJ indictment, showing a huge political mistake that it would be, since he's the overwhelming favorite to win the GOP nomination. Intimidation has long been a Trump calling card. Intimidation? Really? Intimidation. Oh, that's right. Donald Trump sent the DOJ out to bust a whole bunch of parents that were at school board meetings. That's right. I forgot about that. Intimidate. Oh, wait a minute. No. That was Joe Biden. Oh, son of a gun. In mid-September, The Hill reported Hugh Hewitt's controversial interview with Trump when the former president hinted at problems among the American people should he be indicted. So do you think there might be some trouble within the people of the United States if President Trump is indicted? Probably pretty likely. But those people that are contemplating that trouble, so to speak, please listen to me. All you need are numbers, an American flag, and a pocket constitution. That's all you need. Don't take anything else. Don't do it. Trump would have a distinct advantage should he declare his candidacy before a potential DOJ indictment. This week, The Hill reported that influential Republicans expect AG Garland will indict Trump 60 to 90 days after Election Day. Garland could also announce the DOJ will not pursue an indictment against the leading presidential candidate from the opposing political party vying to defeat his boss. Indeed, there will be much talk about shredding the Constitution if Trump is not brought to justice, with headlines screaming, "Politics trumps law." Hasn't politics already trumped law? It sure has. It sure looks like it to me. Trump the Constitution, Trump the Bill of Rights. Politics is threatening to run away with the entire nation, is it not? Okay, so the other eventuality, according to Myra Adams, is the DOJ would indict Trump before he declares his 2024 candidacy. In an August news conference shortly after the Mar-a-Lago raid, Attorney General Garland said upholding the rule of law means applying the law evenly without fear or favor. Therefore, if the DOJ indicts Trump, expect lofty platitudes such as "we are a nation built on laws," and even a former president or leading presidential candidate is not above the law. Well, unless, of course, you're Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Hunter Biden. Anyway, we are a nation of laws. Even a former president or leading presidential candidates are not above the law, along with mountains of evidence and a solid case, just like those impeachments, just like that solid case built by the Mueller investigation. Trump already heralded his response to a DOJ indictment in the previously mentioned Hugh Hewitt interview. He said there's no reason they can indict other than they're just sick and deranged, which is always possible, because I did absolutely nothing wrong. Do you agree? Or did President Trump do something wrong? What did President Trump do wrong specifically? I'm waiting. 817-379-2172. What did President Trump do wrong? If you disagree with the statement that he did nothing wrong because people are just sick and deranged, et cetera, he's done nothing wrong. Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you disagree, what did he do wrong? Still waiting for an answer, says Mike. Me too. I'm still waiting to see what President Trump did wrong. If you know the answer, by all means, call me on the phone immediately. 817-379-2172. We've got a couple of moments for you to do so. Back with more in just a second. This is the Wells Report. Strangely enough, nobody's answered my questions. Any of them. None of them. I asked a bunch of them today. You don't believe me? Go back in the last couple of hours. You'll see. I asked questions. No answers. Donald Trump has obviously done just terrible, wrong things. Okay, what? The answer is nothing. In other words, I'm not saying he hasn't done anything wrong. I'm just saying that there are no answers. Why? I mean, it's so obvious. What's the story? So news from the morning papers, Paul Pelosi is home from the hospital after the hammer attack. We wish him nothing but successful healing quickly too. See what else. There are some other things going on here. The FBI has issued a warning. It's investigating information of a broad threat against synagogues in New Jersey. We're keeping our eyes on that. Also, breaking news from the Wall Street Journal. A growing list of brands have paused their Twitter ads since Elon Musk's takeover, including General Mills, Audi, and Pfizer. Really? That's probably going to cost them a lot of money. That's so silly. People, isn't it amazing how many people will array themselves against fair free speech? Interesting. Just fascinating to me. Let's see, a judge has appointed an independent monitor to oversee Trump Organization financial filings. We'll probably be talking about that tomorrow. Let's see, a round of thunderstorms bringing hail and damaging winds headed towards DFW tomorrow. We'll keep our eyes on that. Herschel Walker, for the first time, has pulled ahead in the polling averages for the Senate seat held by Senator Warnock. It's the first time that's happened in months. Let's see. What else do we have here while we're going over this? All right. Is that about it? Let's see. Yeah. Yep. All right. There you go. That's the most recent news. So what we're doing is we're going over, by the way, this is a really good show. I hope you pass this one along. I hope you subscribe on whatever platform you're watching it on. Please do. This is a good show. I'd be watching it myself if I wasn't doing it. Because a lot of things get discussed here. Because we're just trying to find the truth here. We're trying to give you information that you can use to make better decisions here. As opposed to a news organization that gives you information to make a decision they want you to make. I don't do that here. Absolutely not. Getting back to Ms. Adams from the Hill, who is talking about the dichotomy of President Trump declaring for the 2024 presidential election or Merrick Garland indicting him, I would expect that there's not going to be an indictment from the Department of Justice. If there was going to be an indictment, it would have already happened. And what would you indict the president on? I can hardly wait. And how would you explain indicting the President of the United States and passing on the obvious evidence that would lead to an indictment of Hunter Biden? How do you square those two things with the idea that there's equal representation or equal law in this nation? You can't. President Trump, if he's indicted, would probably try to personalize it by saying indicting me is indicting you, repeating what he said after the Mar-a-Lago raid. It's prosecutorial misconduct, the weaponization of the justice system, and an attack by the radical left Democrats who desperately don't want him to run for president in 2024. I don't know what they're all worried about. I mean, arguably, according to the mainstream media, according to, well, just everyone in Washington, including a bunch of Republicans, Donald Trump doesn't have a chance. So why worry? Myra Adams says she bets that Trump announces his presidential intentions well before the DOJ makes any move. Perhaps the DOJ thinks it would be prudent to wait until the initial Trump fervor dies down. Putting space between pursuing justice and presidential politics is very simple. President Trump issues an idea to run for the 2024 election, and then the DOJ tries to indict him for something? Do you see any problems with that strategy? Yeah. So much for democracy as represented from the left. Trump versus the DOJ could get messy if the GOP wins control of the House, and as expected, Jim Jordan now chairs the House Judiciary Committee. She calls Jordan a longtime Trump sycophant. He sent smoke signals about potentially impeaching A.G. Garland and President Biden. Well, why not? The other side impeached President Trump twice. A.G. Garland, in my view, it's a slam dunk case for oppression under color of office. So then she says, well, Trump would then have a revenge campaign that would prosper. Trump wins even when he loses, is impeached or indicted. Well, maybe it's because all these people have no idea what's going on around them because they simply don't want to believe that the people of the United States actually do own this country. All these rice bowls being dumped on the ground. All because President Donald Trump is the people's president and not theirs. This has been the Wells Report. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you again tomorrow between 2 and 5 Central Time. Have a great day. Well, there you go. Okie as well as Dokie. Let's see, what else do we have here? People waving goodbye. Good night, everyone. Thanks, Mikey. Appreciate your time. Appreciate everything you do for us. You too, Yvonne. God bless you. Thanks very much, Gary. You wonderful human being, you. Mikey, I already said something too. Let's see who else. Alicia, all you folks. God bless all y'all. Take good care, and I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Until then, be